I'm Daryl Greer with the Canadian Press. This is for Minister Hodgson and Premier Eby. We are wondering about the $1.5 billion that went to tariffed industries, steel, copper, aluminum the other day, and the $12 million for softwood lumber. Why did that get less than 100th of these other industries, and how far is that $12 million expected to go?
So maybe I'll start out. I think that's a bit of a mischaracterization of what's happening here. The federal government has committed $2.5 billion to the forest products industry and to helping the industry through this challenging time. The program that was announced last week was for the industries that are affected by the so-called Section 232 tariffs. It was targeted at that particular tariff regime. Softwood lumber is affected by a different set of tariffs, so we have a different set of solutions. We have $2.5 billion allocated to that. The announcement today was committing some of that money to help individual forest products companies here in British Columbia pivot to grow. We've also been working with the national forest products industry, with all of the provincial governments, and with Indigenous nations across the country in what we call a transformational forest products task force. We received the report last week, and we are now using that to develop a national forest product strategy. I talked about that this morning. We will be releasing that strategy later this year, and the goal will be to help this industry pivot to grow. We all understand that the U.S. tariffs on our softwood lumber are unjust and unfair. What we need to do is pull together as a country and tackle that by helping this industry pivot away from reliance on the U.S. industry. That's what the $2.5 billion we've put towards this is doing, and that's what this $14 million is part of today. I don't know if you'd like to.
Sure. The money that was announced last week, I engaged with Minister Jolie, with Mr. Hodgson. I've been reassured that our softwood sector will get the same terms, the same access to financing as these other industries. Minister Hodgson is right. We are all looking forward to the results of this strategic table around softwood and how we're going to work together to ensure this sector is sustainable going forward. Minister Hodgson has heard from me many, many times about softwood. He has internalized the reality that softwood is a bigger industry by GDP and employment than steel and auto parts combined for this country. And I have confidence that he and his colleagues are going to deliver for the softwood sector, both through this task force as well as through direct assistance. And I know he and his colleagues understand the urgency of that for British Columbia.
And just going back to LNG, I'm sorry for getting off topic with the first one. I'm wondering if you can comment on the organizations that came out today opposed to more LNG development, sounding the alarm over the ill health effects of the flaring. You know, LNG Canada has been exceeding its flaring, and these organizations have said that, you know, the profits of this industry, the economic development that this industry is involved in, is perhaps coming at the expense of people's health.
So first of all, thanks for the question. I think it's important we can just talk about these things. You know, the LNG industry is a well-established industry across the world. I think it is important we talk about health. And let me start by saying we take this very seriously. Our 5 joint venture participants, LNG Canada, and me personally, we take that super serious. So we actually welcome the discussion. We respect people's views to speak up. There are many people who would always speak up as well in favour of LNG. So I think we just have to make sure we stay balanced there. In terms of the specific question on health, what I would say is that when we permit these projects at the beginning, we do a health screening assessment. It's a formal process. We did that for LNG Canada. It was independently verified by the Ministry of Health, by various other health agencies and the regulators themselves. We passed all of that. So that process has worked. Subsequent to that, we've also done independent third-party reviews of the health impacts. What we find, and it's transparently posted on websites, is that whilst we are flaring more. That's a pretty normal thing when you start an LNG plant up. But what we're seeing is in what we call the airshed around the community, we have lots of monitors. And in those monitors, we don't see any elevation of the things that we know can cause harm. And all of those things are substantially below the permitted level that is known where health implications can start. So we don't want to be flaring. We're trying to reduce that. It's a normal part of startup. We will reduce that as we go towards steady operations, but we are monitoring very carefully the emissions levels in the community. They're independently verified by third parties, and they're closely scrutinised by government and by the regulators.
Is it happening in your backyard?
I actually grew up in a backyard with 5 flare stacks, so I genuinely, I think there's 2 parts, and I'm being very serious now. One part is we can talk about compliance, and we will do everything to comply. But there's also, I tell you, as a kid, I can remember what those flare stacks looked like, and I can remember the orange skies. I don't remember whether they were compliant or permitted. So the lived experience of the community is just as important as the compliance, and we work on both, and we take that very seriously. Thanks for the question.
Next question.
I'm really short. So, Julie Landry, Radio-Canada. Hi. I'm sorry, but I don't really understand why there's a press conference today and what's so exciting, to be clear. I thought you were already cooperating with that project, going to the Projet des Grands Bureaux, how do you say that? The major project office. What is really new today? Maybe Minister or...
Yeah, absolutely. So from British Columbia's perspective, there are a number of key milestone moments for this project along the route to final investment decision. The final investment decision date, we understand from LNG Canada, will now be by the end of 2026. And one of the milestones that British Columbia was looking for was the release of hundreds of millions of dollars in work. It's around partnership with First Nations and engineering and other key pieces of work that had to be done, which was shared with us in early May, that LNG Canada had made the decision to release that funding and to pass through that gateway, going to final investment decision. To us, the decision to release those hundreds of millions of dollars of investment into moving towards final investment decision is a major vote of confidence in the project, in British Columbia, and in Canada, and the work we've done with the federal government on this project. We think that's worth celebrating. And we'll be looking very carefully and watching very carefully as LNG Canada moves towards that, we hope, final investment decision before the end of the year.
I'll just add, look, the decision to release hundreds of millions of dollars to get to the next stage pre-final investment decision, was made by 5 partners. 5 partners were all from other parts of the world who are looking at Canada and saying, when we look around the world, when we look for places to invest, when we look for partners who can deliver reliably, who will not use energy for coercion, who produce their LNG in the most environmentally responsible way. Canada has the lowest carbon intensity LNG in the world. And when you see countries, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Shell operating all over the world, and from China, all saying, in the world we're in today, we can put our money anywhere, we want to put it in this country. That is a huge show of support. It's showing that we're on the right track, and that in a world where we've had a trade war declared on us, we didn't ask for it, but we need to win it. We need to win it by attracting capital to develop our resources, to put cards in our hands. This is a huge vote where 5 major entities from around the world have said, we're putting cards in your hands.
Next question for Mr. Cooper. For people living in Kitimat, will the flaring go down from phase 1 before any phase 2 comes in?
Yeah, thanks again for the question. Yes, it will. So basically what we normally see, and the scientific articles are around on this as well, when you start these plants up, they're very complex. It takes a lot of work. we put safety first. The flare is first and foremost a safety device. So we'll make sure that we keep the communities and our people and our assets safe. We see increased flaring when we first start these plants up. That's just perfectly normal. And then we see them reduce. And then you've got 40 years of operations with hardly any flare. We don't want to flare because we don't want to impact the community, to the same question. We don't want to flare because we have permits and we want to be compliant. But honestly, we also want to sell the LNG rather than burn it, to be honest with you. So yes, when you start up, you always get more flaring. That was always in our permits, in our discussions. As you go to stable operations, it stabilizes. By the time phase 2 comes on stream, we will have a lot of lessons learned, and there are already learnings being applied in phase 1 that will go to good use to reduce the flaring on phase 2. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Aaron MacArthur, Global News for the Premier. The federal government's announcement on clean energy or clean electricity involves a lot of natural gas generation, not something that's in the cards for British Columbia. Would you consider more natural gas generation? And if not, are you concerned at all that the clean calls for power won't be sufficient for the province's needs going forward?
In British Columbia, we're in a pretty fortunate position when it comes to electricity. We have a lot of options when it comes to generating electricity, from geothermal to hydro to wind to solar. And that enables us to have a grid that is 97% plus clean energy. That small margin is some peaking plants that are natural gas plants in the province. But the huge hydroelectric dams that we have provide support for wind power. And when the wind isn't blowing, we can use the hydro dam. When the sun's not shining on solar, we can use the hydro dam. But when it is blowing and when the sun is shining, then we can keep the water behind the dam and save it for when we need it. This is a massive advantage for our province. We are able to deliver much cheaper electricity than other jurisdictions. This is a big competitive advantage for us internationally right now. The industries we see that are growing the fastest have massive demands for electricity. That's why Minister Dix and his team have been working hard to secure that additional electricity for the province. Most recently, call for power that resulted in now enough electricity for almost 1 million homes in British Columbia. Clean, sustainable power going forward. For us, in the electricity strategy from the federal government, the key part that we were looking for that is very important for British Columbians is, and it sounds technical, it's transmission lines being eligible for federal government support. That means transmission lines within the province, because our North Coast transmission line that will bring clean electricity to mining operations, to energy operations and communities across the Northwest will drive a huge amount of economic activity, make it cheaper to run a mine, make our mines more competitive, but will also reduce pollution, meaning we have the cleanest metals, minerals, and LNG in the world. This is a massive competitive advantage for us. To see the federal government flag that they are interested in participating in that work is very significant, and I was glad to see it.
Hi there, Thomas Seal from Bloomberg. This is, I think, open to anyone, but possibly for Mr. Cooper first. I think you mentioned the JV partners are still looking to satisfy many additional internal requirements. Can you share any colour at all on what they might be?
Yeah, sure. Linking that maybe to the cooperation question, I've done quite a lot of these investments around the world. I always use the analogy of driving the car 70 kilometres down the highway, 30 kilometres through the village, and then you park the car on the driveway very carefully. And that's what this cooperation is about now. We're getting to the point where these joint venture participants, as the Minister said, have elected, and it is a choice, to invest in Canada because of the support and the cooperation we're seeing here and the investment case we see. You've seen other announcements as well for those same joint venture partners investing. In terms of the parking the car on the driveway, the final pieces, there are some supply chain pieces that we just need to finish with contractors. There are labour force things with those contractors. There are some final pieces with the government that we just need to finalise on. And then there are other things with First Nations that we've made really good progress with. We just need to finalise those. Putting all that together into the final approval is where we are. So there are 3 stages: work, assurance, approval. We've done the work. We've done the assurance. No showstoppers. We're now into the approvals, and it's just a final check so we can park that car on the drive.
That's very helpful. Can I ask if, on the government side, one of the unknowns at this moment, maybe it won't be unknown for much longer, is the carbon tax or the carbon price, given we've seen Alberta has potentially a lower price Does that affect some uncertainty on behalf of the JV participants?
Yeah, so, if you talk about the question on what is the cooperation about, it's just getting the final clarity on those things. So if you say, what do international investors really want? They want clarity on policy, they want clarity on regulatory, and they want help to be competitive. It's a very, very tough world out there to make LNG competitive. Most LNG projects don't get to FID, they try. You saw that we had about 15 trying, I think, in 2018, and only one went ahead back then. So actually having the mature conversation about the balanced growth between carbon and investment, I think that's happening in Canada, largely thanks to the gentleman behind me. And I think we're making progress there. So it's really just finalising that carbon competitiveness balance, and I think we're making progress there, yeah.
Thank you very much. We have time for one final question, so I'll go to CTV.
Thank you. Question for Premier Eby. Prime Minister Carney said this morning that his announcement tomorrow with Premier Smith, we will also advance potential pipeline to transport at least 1 million barrels of low-emission Alberta oil a day to new markets. What's your reaction?
Thanks very much. I had the opportunity to speak with the Prime Minister this afternoon about his MOU with Alberta's Premier. I am hopeful to be able to meet with him again next week to follow up. We're reviewing the details the Prime Minister has provided about what's in the MOU in terms of implications for British Columbia, the most significant of which relate to the carbon tax. And we'll be able to speak a little bit more comprehensively to it at that point. But I will say, here today, we're talking about a group of international companies that are investing hundreds of millions of dollars, progressing towards a final investment decision on a major project that will have a material impact on Canada's GDP and on prosperity for British Columbians, high-paying jobs, revenue to pay for public services, and other opportunities. These are the kinds of indicators that one would typically look for in a major project. We have 35 of these. They are worth in excess of $88 billion, not including LNG Canada Phase 2. And from our perspective, there is an opportunity for the federal government to work as closely with us on these projects as they work with the government of Alberta on Premier Smith's proposed pipeline, which has yet to have a proponent or a route. And so I'll be advancing that conversation with the Prime Minister, and I'm hopeful we'll be able to get to a place here in British Columbia, a level of engagement on those projects. He is very open to having that conversation, and I can see the advantages in advancing that conversation at the federal level. So look forward to having more to share about that.
Excellent. Second question for Minister Hodgson. Hang on one sec. At once here. Premier Eby has expressed concern that BC may not be getting the same benefits as Alberta, for example, regarding drop in carbon pricing. What do you say to him and others worried about Ottawa giving Alberta special treatment over BC?
So if we look at projects that have been referred to the Major Projects Office so far, 40% of the value of all of those projects are in one province. They're in British Columbia. British Columbia, as the Premier said, has almost untold opportunity. I just spent 3 days up in the Northwest Critical Mineral and Conservation Corridor, one of the strategies referred to the MPO, that literally has tens of billions of dollars of new clean mining opportunities. I was up visiting the Red Chris mine, which has the potential to completely change the economic outlook for people in the Tahltan Nation and in northwestern British Columbia. I was up touring the North Coast transmission line, or and saw the opportunity to expand the hydroelectric infrastructure in this province to catalyze, again, tens of billions of dollars. We visited the Port of Stewart and saw the opportunity to expand that port to help develop the mines and the other resources in the Northwest. And we visited Kitimat to see the opportunities there for not just LNG Canada, but also Cedar LNG, the first majority Indigenous-owned LNG project in the world. So I couldn't agree more with the Premier. There's a lot to do here. I know the Prime Minister is committed to working with the Premier and everyone in British Columbia to see those projects come to fruition, because a strong BC is a strong Canada.
Thank you very much. That concludes our press conference today. I'll wish everyone a good afternoon.